I'm a translator, is what I am. I'm able to get the codes that are pretty complex and dense and translate them in a way that I think the masses can truly understand.
I'm like, what are you talking about? I was shaking uncontrollably. I thought you had me on a chair that was vibrating. And he said, well, you had a cellular upgrade.
Wow. I believe it's a true manifesto. It doesn't even really technically make me a feminist even, or like hating men. We need both. We need the yin and the yang. We're out of balance. Thank you for letting me
Are you kidding me?
there.
Oh my God.
I mean, I speak light language, private spaces at my meditation altar, and like use it, you know, to heal, to clear.
But I just wanted to be like, wow, can you keep doing that and then just sit here in meditation?
I think we all have the ability to do it.
That you really choose it. Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my debt don't extend me out my dividends.
Jessica, you've been called a voice of her time by Marianne Williamson, who, by the way, was on season 1 of this podcast.
Wow, I think I knew that.
Did you know that?
Yeah,
She's
I did.
amazing.
She is.
And in this interview, I'm going to talk to you about your journey from entrepreneurship. You know, we just talked about how we came from similar worlds.
Yeah.
You were in PR and media, I was a TV journalist, and both of us kind of got, like, you can't avoid the magnetism of the path that we're on with spirituality. Your connection with the Pleiadians we'll talk about, which I'm so, I don't know anything and I want to know everything, okay? And then also some tips on how people can embrace the age of the feminine that we're in now.
Totally.
And use that, or not use, utilize that to live a more abundant life.
Let's do it all.
Good?
I'm so excited to finally be able to talk about all this stuff.
Yeah, well, tell me why. Let's start there. Why do you say you're finally able to talk about it now?
Well, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm starting my 3rd business after I just sold my 2nd, failed at my 1st one. And I feel like I've identified as a spiritual person before anything else, but I'm identified by the world as a business person. And I've learned how to win in that world. I've been very successful and sort of the 3D, I like to call it, you know, corporate entrepreneurial grind. And I was really hooked into what I call the matrix, the toxic masculine, patriarchal kind of game of success. I always chose my spirituality as my way to sort of heal and deal, and I believe that your business will only grow to the extent you grow as a person and ultimately a spiritual being. But it became kind of, as my passion and understanding of the spiritual space became bigger, it was more complex. You know, you could call it weird, you could call it woo. And I was living in this world that felt very compartmentalized, and I couldn't fully express my truth. I feel like with my new book, with my new business, with my new podcast, I feel like I'm coming out of the spiritual closet, frankly. And I think that when you're out of alignment, you know, not that I was fully out of alignment, I was successful at what I was doing. It catches up with you after a certain period of time. And in 2022, I crashed. I really hit a deep state of burnout.
What does that look like?
I was diagnosed with situational depression. I couldn't leave my house for months. I had no energy to shower, socialize. I've never experienced depression at that level, and it was completely because I had burned my body into the ground working.
2022?
This was in 2022.
Wow, it's not that long ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago. I sort of hit a rocket ship with my last business that I just sold, the Simply Be agency. And it was so on purpose, and I created a whole bunch of impact with that business. I created a beautiful culture, scaled a huge team, served hundreds of clients, really helping them to find their authentic voice through their brands. But as the CEO of that business, it was like holding up the sky, you know, constantly 100-hour weeks, not sleeping, sprinting up a mountain. Like, imagine that, nonstop for 6 years straight. And it was all because I was frankly unrooted from my body, from trusting Gaia, and that I had all of the codes in me to simply receive versus drive as hard as I was driving. And so in 2022, I actually moved from Chicago, which I love, it's my home city, but it's a big, intense, you know, concrete jungle. And I had moved down to Nashville for that winter just to sort of try out that city. I ultimately moved there. But I rented this Airbnb on 10 acres of land in January of 22. And I get down to this house at the beginning of the year, and I couldn't stop crying. I had no energy. I had no motivation to like put makeup on. And I would go on, my weekly calls with my therapist, and I was like, I think I'm just sad. I think I'm just tired. And my therapist, after a few sessions, was like, actually, no, I'm going to diagnose you with depression. And frankly, her telling me that was such a permission slip to unravel even further into that darkness. And I let myself be with it. And she recommended that I explore prescription medication. And I had never been on a prescription drug for my mental health in my life. And I've nothing against it. I think that is a beautiful path. If it works for you, it saves lives. But I got a referral to a holistic psychiatrist for that potential diagnosis. And he took one call with me. He's like, you don't need drugs. You need sleep. You need to rebalance your hormones. And he put me on a ketamine protocol.
Well, we have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Can we actually kind of like go into it a little and then come back?
Absolutely.
Because I'm doing a whole episode on ketamine.
Wow.
And so I thought,
Amazing.
I guess I have to try it, and I didn't want to. Like the doctor actually, he's my stem cell doctor,
Amazing.
one of them, and he convinced me, he's like, Frank, you really should try it if you're gonna do an episode on it.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay. So I did 3, and I only agreed to 3. He said do 6. I agreed to 3. After the 3rd, I was like, now I know why you say 6. It was like the 3rd where I dropped in.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Do you know, okay, tell me if this is legit or not, but in my last one, that 3rd one, and I have 3 more coming up, my whole body, it felt like I was like seizure shaking, like and I just felt anxiety, fear leaving my body,
Amazing, yes.
right? But when I took it off, I said, were you in the room the whole time? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, were you worried when I was shaking like that? He's like, you weren't shaking.
Wow.
I'm like, what are you talking about? I was shaking uncontrollably. I thought you had me on a chair that was vibrating.
Wow.
And I know for sure my spine was a little bit, I have a blanket on. It probably was so subtle on the outside, but on the inside, it felt like I was just. And he said, well, you had a cellular upgrade, which I've only ever heard of like when I do ayahuasca and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear it that it can just come from your own consciousness when you're in that place of stillness.
Yes.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about what ketamine was like for you.
I love that we're talking about this because I think ketamine is a revolutionary medicine in the world of mental health, but also the quantum. And for me, I did six treatments, three treatments, 2 weeks in a row. And I was going in for my depression, but it has obviously psychedelic properties that allows you to travel and journey and trip and go back to childhood trauma. And I measured my depression every session on a scale of 1 to 10. I did this with myself in my own journal. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most depressed, 1 being not depressed at all. Over the course of 6 sessions, because it really is accumulative.
Yeah.
It was like I had glasses on that were covered in dust and I couldn't see my life. And it just continued to scratch the dust off. So by session 1, I was at a 10. By session 6, I was at a 1. It completely healed my depression. And I had a therapist in the room with me who guided me and was sort of like the shaman, even though she's a registered therapist. And I went back to deep, deep childhood wounding with my father, where he said some of the most horrific things to me that I carried with me my whole life. Really made best friends with my little girl. There was one scene when I was probably 14. I was going through, rebellious hormones, and I had like clipped out all of these images of Keanu Reeves and like Luke Perry and like covered my wall in this mural of like hot guys. And one day my dad came in and he ripped them all down. And in the ketamine journey, my higher self came in, and instead of looking at my dad and being like, fuck you, like defending her, I looked at my little 14-year-old teenage adolescent girl and I was like, you're so awesome. That was so cool. That was so creative and artistic. What a badass are you? And so it was a lot of unpacking a lot of that from my childhood, because I like to say that I've spent my whole life trying to make my father proud of me, which is really, I think, what drove me to be this ambitious, fiery, super successful entrepreneur that ended up driving me back into the ground. But what I will say about ketamine, which I think is so powerful to say, that my doctor taught me, my holistic psychiatrist, depression is essentially inflammation in the brain. That your brain starts to stop communicating, the neuroplasticity starts to dim, and the left brain and the right brain hemispheres of your brain can't communicate with one another. And what ketamine essentially does is it reduces the inflammation in your brain so that you can actually experience a physical sense of peace So what you were talking about of you vibrating and things releasing from your body, even though your therapist couldn't see it, and you were being upgraded. That's one of my favorite things about that medicine, because I've done Bufo and Aya and all of them, MDMA and ceremony, all of them. But ketamine created, at least for me, this pure sense of zero anxiety.
Yeah.
And
So
I carry
true.
anxiety in my body. And so imagine walking through life, through, your days without any physical anxiety. It was life-changing in a large degree. And I think that, my doctor recommends you go back and kind of get maintenance treatments, like once every couple months. But ketamine healed my depression. I say this in my book, but it did not heal my habits. And I kind of kept grinding that year. And at the end of 22 is when the real burnout happened. Like, my mind was clear, but my stress levels were crazy. My body got tired again. So I believe in the power of medicine. Obviously you do too. I think it's revolutionary, and it's a large part of what's happening right now on this planet, of us awakening. And I love that it's being sort of served and available to the masses. We have to do it, one, in integrity, right, with healers and shamans and doctors who are of the light, who come in service of you. And I've unfortunately had some ceremonies where that wasn't the case. But you have to do the work, and the ceremony is the doorway.
The integration, though.
The integration is the real ceremony.
Yes, 100%. And I always tell people, I'm writing a book now, and as I'm outlining it, one of the chapters is life is the ceremony.
Yes.
And it's all about taking that ceremony, and it's a beautiful thing, right? To sit in the plant medicine, and like you said, with people of the light, with professionals, with shamans, with people who, like, this is their lineage. But if you're just doing it and then coming back to it every 6 months, because then you didn't integrate.
Yeah, and it can be used as a form of escapism. I talk about plant medicine. My new book, The Light Work. Plant medicine has been super integral and accelerating to my journey, into my awakening, into my healing. But you have to be so discerning. And it is sort of trendy now, and it is available kind of everywhere you turn. And
oh my God.
Just because someone reads a book, does one ceremony, doesn't make you a shaman.
Thank you. I have clients, because I see clients, and they'll always be like, hey, I'm working with the medicine, and do you recommend any place in the US? And I'm like, honestly, no.
No, go
And
to
there
the
might be, but
jungle.
I'm not going to recommend it. And then all the people that ignored me always ended up in our next session being like, oh, it was so bad. There was sexual stuff going on. There was this. And I'm like, well.
You can pick up entities.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I clear entities. It's one of my things, which
Yeah.
I know we'll talk about in your podcast too, but
yeah.
it's one of the things that I clear from people. And a lot of times, you can pick that up. And because a shaman knows, you'll see, I don't know if you've seen this, but in ceremony, you'll be laying and all of a sudden they'll go to like a corner or something, and like they'll start waving their stuff, and you know that they're clearing an entity that they detected.
Yes.
Keeping it out of the room, keeping it out of the space.
I did ayahuasca for the first time a couple years ago, and it was in a shala. It was in Costa Rica. Like, I went to the jungle. I worked with a very revered shaman, but there were 40 people in that shala that I didn't know, and a few of those people had like full-on attacks. And your field is so wide open, right? And I did my best to protect myself, but sometimes you can't help what comes through. And I had an entity that I picked up that kind of took me months to get off me. And you just have to be so reverent. You have to be so discerning. You have sovereignty. Like, if I look back actually on that experience when I went to that retreat, I could feel that the energy was off, and I did it anyway, and I paid the price. And so I have in my book all of these disclaimers, like these footnotes. Anytime I talk about plant medicine in my own language, I'm like, please know that this isn't something to do lightly. This isn't a trend, that you really have to find the right healers and do this with so much intention, because it's no joke.
It's so true. Yeah, because in the beginning, I was like, I'm an intense person, so I'd be like, everybody should do this. And I've taken my mom, I've taken my brother, but there have been times where I'm like, you have to. It's stupid not to. And now I'm like, I don't know if you should. Like, listen to your heart. Do it in the right place. Like, now I'm very careful to tell anyone about the medicine.
Vibration, people, environments, you got to do your homework. You really have to trust yourself and set yourself up for clarity in that space.
Right now, all around me, there are the frequencies of abundance and inner peace. You can have that and more. So take a second and let me tell you about Quantum Upgrade. Talk about like the quantum upgrade dashboard so people can see sort of how it works.
We use a very complicated, sophisticated system, which is, as far as we know, the most powerful source out there for quantum energy on Earth. You can pick from like, I think 26, 28 different frequencies now that we have. Inner peace, which you could leverage at night, for example. A lot of people do that. We have the Olympic performance. We have even something like weight management. We have the abundance prosperity. The service actually starts. Like within 5 minutes, the energy, you will notice it starts ramping up. In the dashboard, you can select the Hawkins level for the day and pick between a level from 500 to I think like 1,200 or something like that. Just start low, go on 600 because it's not about faster, stronger, more powerful. Best is what feels good to you.
Like men's booster, women's booster, inflammation support, testosterone booster.
It's activating that testosterone actually can increase again. And 5 of these studies, and it showed in 46% to 100% acceleration in wound healing. But we do have a free trial that we want to offer all your listeners. So code frankly, you get 15-day free trial.
Now, okay, your book.
Yes.
The Light Work, it's called, right? Which is so cool.
Thank you.
Reclaim your feminine power, live your cosmic truth, and illuminate the world.
Yes.
What a cool title.
Thank
and what
you.
What a good goal. Illuminate the world.
That's what I'm here to help everyone else do. That's what the book's for.
Yeah. We should talk about that and also how so I wrote down here a few notes about just, I skimmed through it. I was able to kind of get a grasp of a few, I can't wait to really get into it, but you guide readers through your journey from, successful yet burnt out, which you just described, the marketing executive and entrepreneur, and you worked with some of the biggest brands only to then realize that you needed to nurture your own light, which you weren't doing, I guess, as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So how do you kind of take people through that journey so that they can do it?
So the book, the book is, I believe, it's a true manifesto on what it means to be a light worker today on this planet, particularly for the female experience, but my book really is for everybody. And I think that we forget how needed we are right now. I feel like we're at this time in humanity where we are literally going to shift the way that our children and our children's children and our children's children's children are going to inherit this planet, like this moment in time. Yes. And most of us don't realize the true depth of responsibility that is, because we're stuck in our own shit. And that, for a woman, shows up in our relationships, our friendships, our relationships to our bodies, how we feel about money, how we can be victims to the world. And we have to use the dark. I'm not here to bypass anything. I have a whole chapter at the beginning of the book that talks about the importance of the dark.
Oh, good.
Because that's where we find our light. Mm-hmm. And so the book is sort of constructed in 3 sections as such. So it starts with inner light. How do we cultivate the light within? How do we connect to source? How do we use our own emotions, which has been suppressed and repressed on this planet, whether it's from ourselves or from the forces that unfortunately try to rule us. Our relationships to our bodies. Women struggle so much with our bodies. There's so much programming, not just in how it looks, but surrendering our sovereignty to doctors and our health. I talk about how we need to utilize our bodies as sacred technology, not necessarily flesh, bone, and fluids. I talk about personal power. Really, that's the kind of essence of the book. No longer being a victim of what's happening to us, but realizing it's all happening for us, and that we are absolutely conscious co-creators to create our own reality. And that's like the most fun kind of law, I believe, and I learned that from the Pleiadians, of this reality, is that we get to choose it with the power of our own thoughts. The second section is outer light, which is how does that light, once we've cultivated it within, shines outwardly in the relationships and spaces that really impact us the most. Our family of origin. I have a very vulnerable chapter about my family. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that we've all experienced trauma, whether micro, macro, or whatnot. Our relationships with our lovers, our partners, our romantic relationships, and really make the point that we are always going to be our own greatest love. Friendships. Many women struggle with cattiness, gossip, insecurity, jealousy, feeling lonely in the world of female friendships. And then I take that section home with money and rewiring our codes for abundance. And I talk about the 8 embodiments of divine feminine wealth, because that was one of my biggest lessons.
Well, let's get into that. I was going to hold off on that, but we can. Well, actually, right before we do, I want to ask, because I think people I think it's important from the very beginning, the whole light thing, right?
Yeah.
I cringe sometimes, and probably a lot of people might, I don't know, because of how diluted it's become when people, I'm a light warrior, I'm a light, a worker or whatever it is, and what they mean, or they're like positive vibes, and I'm like, do you meditate? No. Do you do yoga? No. But I drink kombucha and I like love everything, and I'm like, I did a vision board this year, and I'm like, that's all really cute and nice.
Yeah.
But like, so you know what I'm saying? Like light work has been so
Co-opted.
Overused.
100%.
So then if I see like a trendy, cool girl like you, woman, right? Like you talking about it, I could easily just go, whatever, I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah.
So why should people open the book? And maybe what I love, because you talked about in your preface, which is when I was like, oh, okay, she's legit, is because you talk about like the Kabbalah and ancient Egypt sort of perspective of what light actually is.
Yes.
So maybe we start there and then we can go into principles.
Beautiful. And I appreciate that. I think it's really true. And I even say that in my book. Like, light has been known and revered since the beginning of this planet. The opening statement in the Bible is, let there be light.
And I actually think this might be controversial, that Jesus was actually the sun. I am the light of the world.
Yes.
Right? And I think that it's like literally not just S-O-N, S-U-N, that he was like an incarnation of the sun.
And his message, from what I understand, was really to show that everyone is that light, not him.
We're all rays of light.
We're
exactly.
all rays of light,
yes.
right? And the human experience in coming onto this planet is a dualistic, 3D, polarizing place to be, where there is dark and light, and that's why we came here.
Best way to learn, right?
That's the only way to learn. And back to the Pleiadians, the way that I define light is through their terminology, which is information. That's the synonym for light. Light is information. And the truth of this universe, frankly, as far as I also understand it, is love. That's really what we're all trying to come home to. And we come to Earth as a student, right? It's school. It's an assignment we've all been put upon to learn that again, because we've forgotten that. This human experience is an amnesia trip. And so light is information. It's simply waking up to the codes of possibility and limitless potential and community and harmony and oneness and all of these 5D principles that sound really woo-woo, but we have to go through the dark to understand that fully. Darkness is not evil. Dark isn't bad. Dark isn't toxic. Dark is simply lack of information. That's the opposite of light. And we have to look at the dark. We have to sit with the dark. We have to know our dark. We have to build a relationship. We have to accept our dark. We have to love our dark. And that's how we turn on the light. That's how the light comes on. We can fully see the truth. Where we ignore the dark, when we suppress the dark, when we bypass the dark, when we drink our kombucha and say love and light, we're skipping over the dark. And that's when it becomes dangerous. And that's when it becomes putrefying and toxic and builds unconsciously, so that we're walking through our lives unintegrated. And so to your beautiful statements, Frank, about why would I, all the girls are trendy and cute talking about light work. This book is as raw and unapologetic and vulnerable and honest about the dark shit that I've gone through as much as my community I know that I'm close to has gone through. It's a collective common experience to be a woman today. There's a lot of unique circumstances we have, but common threads we all face. And I call it out. And every single chapter goes through the dark stories of these areas of our lives that hurt us, that break us, that create that fear, and hopefully show them the possibility of, once you move through that, that's where your light is found. That's when you become a light warrior. That's when you find your power and strength and become indestructible to a large degree. And we learn those same lessons over and over and over again. My path is not a straight line. Like I talk about this in my chapter with my husband. Like, I was a needy, codependent, like insecure, wanted the fairy tale kind of love before I met my husband. And we became, we fell in love fast. And I'm still with him 12 years later and still have those propensities for drama and codependency and neediness. And it's just really coming home to that truth always, and never forgetting that the work is never done. The operative word in light work is work.
I love that, yeah. And then because you mentioned Pleiadians, we should probably explain to people, because you say it and I know immediately what it is, but some people are like, what? They might think it's a country or what, like, who are these people?
Yeah, totally.
But, it's actually really interesting. And do you know anything about Shasta? Have you been to Mount Shasta?
I was going to tell you all about Shasta, because I was just there last year.
Whoa.
And I sat with them.
That's where you sat with them?
On the mountain. I've sat with them a few times before them, but they
So that's where I want to go write my book. I have like I'm going to go rent an Airbnb for a week, but you know, they have these like, have you seen those glass rooms where you're like in the middle of a place? They're all over the world, but it's like a big, you know, it can be a pyramid or a circle, a sphere, but they're just glass all around. And I want one of those in like the Mount Shasta area. But because they say that's where Saint Germain, that's where the Pleiadians are. Yes. And it's one of those things like Egypt, which I know we're going to talk about Egypt because of your experience there. It's one of those things where I purposely keep putting off and acting like it's not there because I know something massive is going to happen when I go. And I'm like, God, how much can someone take in a year, you know, or in a lifetime? Yeah. But let's talk about Shasta and this idea that the Pleiadians are there.
Well, the Pleiadians are everywhere.
Oh, okay.
There are certain portals on our planet, Shasta being one of them, you know, Egypt being another, that are more direct, open portals, right, to the cosmos and to the galactic, where you can commune with them more directly. But they're here. I believe that, you know, the Pleiadians they don't live in linear time, right? We live in linear time on this dimension, but they live in quantum time. So some people say they're from the past, some people say they're from the future. I believe they're both. I believe that they're the original teachers of light on this planet. They're, you know, part of our star system. They're part of the Milky Way galaxy. They're one of the brightest constellations in the sky, the 7 sons of Pleiadians. They're called the 7 sisters. There's 7, so we have 1 sun, there's 7 with multiple planets rotating around these suns. It's a, you know, a colony, I say that in a positive way. And their consciousness is pure. And they have come to this planet at this time to remind us of that light within us, to switch on the proverbial light switch and show us what we're really meant to do in this reality. And I read a book many years ago called The Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak, and I cannot recommend that book enough.
What's it called?
Bringers of the Dawn.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm not a medium like you, right? Like
I'm not a medium. I'm not a medium. But I do.
Channel, you do all the things, but I'm a translator is what I am. I'm able to get the codes that are pretty complex and dense and translate them in a way that I think the masses can truly understand. And when I read that book, I don't know, 7 years ago, I don't even remember how it came into my life. One of the very first things they say is, you're reading this book because you are a member of the family of light. You wouldn't be reading this book if you weren't. And it was such an affirmation and an invitation to trust that, really. And there was, you know, it's a very dense book. This woman, Barbara Marciniak, she channeled the Pleiadians, like Abraham Hicks, like Esther Hicks channels Abraham. It's an entire book of their language, but she just wrote it. And it's very dense and decoded. And I read this book, and every single word made sense to me. It was like everything I've been believing my whole life but could never articulate or find the words for. And really what they teach is this idea that thought creates. Thought is a thing, just like this chair is a thing, just like your necklace is a thing. Thought it's matter, and we can use it and control it and take our power over our own thoughts to create our own reality. And I believe I'm Pleiadian. I believe I descend from that star system. And frankly, I think most of us on this planet are, I don't believe I know. I mean, NASA said this on a 60 Minutes segment I watched years ago when they were talking about the Hubble telescope and how, based on the updates to that telescope, our universe, not just our galaxy, but the entire universe, is trillions and trillions of times bigger than they had originally thought decades earlier. And it's ever expanding. It's never ending. It's truly infinite. And this scientist from NASA said to the 60 Minute interviewer, we are literally made of stardust. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, I had a conference that I put on for 3 years, and the first one, Deepak Chopra was like the speaker, and he spoke about this, and I remember the whole room, it's like 1,000 people, was just like, what? Because he was like, think about this, there's 180 billion or something, he said, galaxies that we know of.
Yes.
Those are the ones we know of.
Yes.
You know, and then he's like talks about how we started. He literally went back of how we went from, he started from stardust to where we are right now, and he walked us through the timeline. And I remember just everyone being dead silent.
Yeah, he's amazing. I just saw him speak at a conference a couple months ago, and it was at a big corporate like business conference, and Deepak Chopra's on stage, and everyone just sort of like nodding, and I like stood up. I'm like, does everyone see what this man is giving us right now? It was such a powerful vibration of truth. And to that point, another data point just to blow your mind, that when I heard this, at least it blew mine. So when we look up at the Milky Way, just like take our own galaxy for a second, billions and billions and billions of stars. There are more planets in our universe than there are stars.
More planets than stars. Wow.
More planets, that's one data point.
Wow.
Like our sun star, there's 9 planets rotating around it. From eons away, you can't see the planets, you can just see our sun star, depending on where you are. Our planet, the planet Earth, is in what's called a Goldilocks zone, right? Not too hot, not too cold. And that's why life can form here. So if you think about there being more planets than there are stars in the entire universe, it's scientifically impossible that we're the only species in the universe.
Wow. Yes.
I didn't say that. Harvard and NASA did. You know?
Yeah.
That's just factual. So back to the Pleiadians, when I understood that they existed, who they were, what their messages were, I actually journeyed with them in a ceremony with a healer, no medicine, and I astral traveled to the Pleiadians. And I've never felt a sense of
And that was in Shasta?
No, this was on a retreat years ago in Italy. But that experience, and I write about this in my book, of just sitting on this woman's table, her putting her hands on my head, me closing my eyes, her closing her eyes, and me going somewhere. And I came back into my body after an hour, and I explained to her what I had seen. She had seen the exact same thing because she was shaman. And I had this sense of home, this sense of safety, this sense of familiarity that I had never felt before. And she affirmed for me that I was Pleiadian. And to your audience, like the Pleiadia, who's like, what is that? It sounded ridiculous. It sounded crazy. And yet I trusted that. And then I went on the path of doing all of this research about them. And I knew that she was right.
I want to ask you about the language of light, because when you were describing that book, which sounds amazing, I remembered, I flashed back to sitting right here with an incredible healer, medium, she's everything, named Gaia, right?
Okay.
And she said, you know, we did a private session after the podcast, and one of the things she said, which all of them were mind-blowing, and that's how, you know how, like, if somebody tells you about your past life and they're like, you were Cleopatra, or you were what, and you're like, okay, what am I going to do with that?
Right,
you know what I mean?
right.
And how do I know you're not just saying that, you know? She was so specific about every past life and what happened and what you're repeating in this life. So then when she said this, I believed it. And she said, in the next few years, you'll learn about the language of light. And you're going to write a book. And in that book, there will be the language of light. It'll be written in English, but behind it are the codes of light. So when people are reading the book, they'll actually be downloading light language codes.
Yes.
I don't know what that means, Jessica. I
Yeah.
have no idea what that means, but I
Yeah.
do know, and it was like probably what I say is my last Aya ceremony, but who knows if I'll ever do it again. I always say it's my last.
Sure.
But I did another one about a year and a half ago with my little brother in Costa Rica. And the whole time I'm sitting up in perfect meditation, 4 days. You know, everyone around me is laughing, crying, whatever. And I'm sitting up in meditation the entire time. And at one point there's like the candle, it's the only source of light in the entire room is this candle in the middle of the room. And almost the entire time I'm staring at it and just dialogue back and forth with this light. Like, can you teach me about passion? Can you teach me about codes? What does manifesting look like? What is a miracle? And I'm just talking and asking questions and getting answers. And one of the things is like, it was telling me kind of what you described when we talked about Jesus and how we're all these rays of light.
Yes.
And it was telling me that, you know, you don't see it, but just like this ray of light, because it was like a thread of light between the candle and me. And it was like, just like that, there's billions of those all around during the day from the sun. You're just not seeing them. They're invisible, but we're fully blanketed with these rays of light.
Yeah.
And it's actually creating the projection that you're seeing. And so it was like telling me, work with that.
Yes.
And so little by little, I'm trying to understand that. I'm figuring it out. And I know I'm not, we're not meant to force it. It'll happen naturally. It'll unfold. That's the masculine, right? Wanting to force it. And then the feminine just lets it happen.
Of course.
It attracts, it doesn't force. Yeah. And so I guess my question is, what do you have to say about any of that?
The language, I have a lot to say about it. I love all of that. It's so beautiful.
I know you have a chapter about language of light. I saw it.
Yeah. I basically have a glossary at the top of the book that I reframed as the language of light, because I talk about a lot of, I mentioned the Matrix, I mentioned 5D consciousness, I mentioned Starseed, I mentioned...
Which I have an issue with one of the things you said in that glossary, but we'll get to that.
I want to hear that. Let's talk about it. Let's totally talk about it. So just to say to the reader, like, I'm going to drop some terms that might not be familiar to you, and instead of you thinking, what does that mean? I'm just going to lay it all out, is how I define it as the author. But the language of light, and what you were saying about that wisdom you got about writing your own book, which your truth are your own codes, right? And you were saying earlier about having this ketamine experience and like the upgrade that doctor told you had. I talk about in the book, you know, we're made of DNA, right? And a lot of this DNA is dormant, sleep, inactive. And when we wake up to the truth of our own power, when we have these dark experiences that lead us more into the light, the truth of who we are, our genetic blueprint, our authentic genetic blueprint comes online. And so you writing a book of your truth are your own codes. That is the light right there. And we can have our own like everyday English version language of our own codes as we're speaking our truth, yes, but then there is also light language that is a direct communication. I wouldn't even call it vocabulary or vernacular that you speak with source. That happened to me, at least in Egypt. So I would love to share. I know you want to go. That place will fuck you up. That place will blow up your life.
I know it will.
It will blow up your life. And it did for me. And many crazy experiences.
Wow.
I wouldn't even call them crazy, just like epic, amazing, like the most powerful experiences of my life, completely sober and coherent in these temples.
I want to be like there at night. You know how they do like they'll take you, I guess it's a thing, I don't know, or maybe just my friends, I'm sure you did too, where they're like, oh yeah, I was there at 3 a.m. by myself in the Great Pyramid,
Yes.
or all these different things.
You got to wake up really early on those trips.
Wow.
Like you don't sleep when you go to Egypt. You
Yeah.
have early morning wake up calls. Usually if you're going with like a group we would go with, they're not traditional like tourism groups. They're people there on a pilgrimage.
Yeah, I don't want to be with the Sphinx like, look, I'm holding it in my hand in the photo. Yeah.
No. Actually, the first morning I was in Egypt, we went to the Sphinx at 4 a.m. because we could have that early access. Most people are not allowed to touch the Sphinx. You have to stand around a big wall and like look at it. We were able to go past the fence, walk up to it, and I put my hands on it. This was the first holy sacred site I touched being on that country's land. And I close my eyes and I immediately hear voices. I'm clairaudient. And I heard them say to me, welcome home. We've been waiting for you. We're so happy you're here. My whole body felt like it was lighting up. I peel back from this Sphinx structure. I'm like, whoa. The second I was doing that, my friend was with me. She was 50 feet away taking a photo of the Sphinx, not really realizing I was standing there. She was just trying to get a picture of it. I should show you this picture. She shared it with me. I'm gonna frame it, put it on my wall. There's a huge light beam going through my back.
Whew. I have to see that.
Like, this is Egypt. You think you're a spiritual person and then you go to Egypt and you're like, oh, I get it now. And so the most significant moment I had in Egypt was towards the end of the trip when we went to Dendera, the temple of Hathor, who's the goddess of frequency and the goddess of joy and the goddess of bliss. And we were roaming through her temple. We were kind of off on our own, and there's these little chambers like up in the wall, and you have to climb up a ladder to get inside. So I climb up this ladder and I just, I kind of follow my intuition, and I heard my higher self say, press your whole body up against this wall. I wanted all of my chakras to just be as pressed up against it as possible. And within minutes, not even minutes, seconds, I literally got hit by lightning. Like a diamond white flash of light hit my body. My whole auric field expanded beyond the temple, beyond Egypt, beyond this planet, like into the infinite. And I started hearing voices. And I've also done a lot of research on the placement of Hathor, and it's a direct line to the Pleiadians. And they actually say that there are 7 Hathors through a lot of different religious texts, and there are 7 sisters of the Pleiadians. So the Hathors and the Pleiadians, in my point of view, are sort of one and the same.
That actually really resonates, yeah.
And they started speaking to me in rapid succession. And their core message to me was essentially that the feminine frequency is here on the planet right now. It's my job as a female body to lead that, to help other women be leaders of that, to not forget what a beautiful divine blessing it is to be in a human body, that we shouldn't take it for granted. They're like, we wish we could be in a human body. We're not, so please enjoy it for us. And I got a lot of codes and downloads in that moment. I wrote it all down. It was really the inspiration for my whole book. And I climb down the ladder. I get back on the bus. We have a 3-hour bus ride to Abydos, which is where the first flower of life was ever discovered. It's also the place, they say, where language was formed on this planet in Abydos, Egypt. On this bus ride, I start shaking, like freezing cold. My body starts convulsing. I'm kind of by myself. I don't know what's happening. I didn't want to say anything. it's almost as if I felt like I had the flu all of a sudden, but I had no respiratory problems. My body just hurt. So we get to this hotel, we check into our hotel room, everyone's going down to dinner. I can barely move, I'm freezing. I cover my whole body with blankets and towels, and I'm just lying in bed shivering. It was about 4 hours after this light body
experience.
And I'm lying in bed. This is gonna sound kind of crazy, but I'll do it for you. So
Nothing
I'm lying
sounds
in
crazy
bed.
to me. Speak it.
Great, I'm gonna. Here we go. So I'm lying in bed and nothing is helping. And the only way that I feel like I can make myself feel better, I have a conscious thought to hum. Just start humming, because the vibration in my body will help maybe calm my body down. So I start humming and I'm like, lying in bed, like, it's not strong enough. Another conscious thought, open your mouth. So I start moaning. I'm just lying there like, when you're sick, you're moaning like in pain. And I'm projecting this monotone sound out of my mouth in bed. And something started happening. And I'm lying there like this. And I did that for an hour. And my whole body calmed down. And I didn't know what I was saying, but I did. It was like, turn to the right. My body could turn to the right. Bring it down into your womb. Bring it back up into your heart. Bring it up to your crown. Move it through your legs. And everything started to settle. And I felt like more alive and more present, connected up there, grounded in here than I'd ever felt in my life. And I was raw after that, but I was better. And this is the last part of the story I'll tell you. I went to sleep. I finally fell asleep. I wake up the next morning. My group's down at breakfast, and we had these 2 Egyptian men that were our tour guides, and they were having breakfast together at this table. And I make a beeline to them because I needed to tell somebody what had happened, to process what had happened in the temple, the shaking, the light language, the healing. And I go up to them and I explain it to them. They look at me and they look back at each other as if I'm not even standing there. And one of them says to the other, "This is why people come to Egypt, so that they can remember. And they can go make the world better." Literally.
How can I even ask any questions after that?
Thank you for letting me
Are you kidding
go
me?
there.
Oh my God.
I mean, I speak light language in my own private spaces at my meditation altar and use it, to heal, to clear. But that was the first time I had ever spoken it like that, and it opened up a whole new access.
I was only holding it together for the sake of the audience and the podcast, but I just wanted to be like, wow, can you keep doing that? And then just sit here in meditation,
I think we all have that ability to do it. We all have that ability to channel it. And they say that it is a direct communion with where you're from. And that's really what I felt was happening to me, that I was talking to and through another part of the universe that I'm still connected to, and that was my way of connecting with them.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining another episode of the Quite Frankly podcast. I am so excited to bring season 2 to you, and I want to thank you for watching, but also please don't forget to subscribe, because we're noticing in the analytics that some people are watching multiple videos but haven't subscribed yet, and it really helps me to continue to improve the show. One of those improvements is that this season I'm only having 1 sponsor for the entire season instead of 5. And it's LEELA Quantum Technology. So they are the official sponsors of the Quite Frankly podcast. And I'm so excited because if you have followed me for a while, you know how much I love this technology. They have multiple third-party double-blind studies to show how this affects your health in a really positive way. But also the way I use it is I write my intentions on a piece of paper like this, and I put it in there, and it's now in the quantum field. So more about that in a bit, and thank you for watching. Is there a connection, and this is a side note before I get into the next question, with Sirius with any of this or no?
So that's a great question, yes.
Okay.
Sirius is another star system in our galaxy. There's the Pleiadians, there's the Arcturians, there's the Sirians, there's the Minnetonкans, there's a whole set of star families. Sirius is in our galaxy during Lionsgate, or around that time of the summer. They say that the Sirius sun star is the second brightest star in our galaxy next to the sun. And from what I understand about Sirius is that there's a group of beings and extraterrestrial families that are the Sirians, separate from the Pleiadians. I've actually connected with the Syrians in certain meditations and journeys. While I was in Egypt, I communed with Sekhmet, the lioness goddess. I believe she's from there. These are my own personal beliefs and philosophies. Honestly, I think it's worth anybody who's interested in this sort of conversation is to do your own research and kind of understand the different personality types, really, of these different star families, and you'll start to see yourself. It's sort of like taking an Enneagram test or an astrology test or a human design. You're like, yeah, that is me.
Right.
When you learn more about these star families, you can kind of attune to where you think you're from. And I would encourage you to follow that intuition and go deeper and read their books, watch the Gaia TV shows, there's a lot of content
I connect with
there.
the Pleiadians, I really do, and that's why Shasta, and it keeps coming to me, and Saint Germain does too, so I think I'm being pulled there. But I was in Spain maybe like 3 months ago, and we did breathwork with this amazing breathwork instructor from Mexico, and he came to Spain, but we did it outside in the cold, and we're looking at the sky, and at one point, all the sky went black. And we're in a rural part of Spain. It was an island, it was Mallorca. And so many stars. Yeah. But all of a sudden they all went black, and I'm just looking at one for like this 30-minute breath work. And it was serious. They all told me later that, that's the brightest one.
Yep.
And everything went dark. Later that night, I go to bed. I wake up at 3 a.m. All these green, red, and white orbs around my window like this, like little circular motions. And I remember, because I was so tired, and I'm like I'm very spiritual, but also I love pampering myself and being comfortable. So I was like, look, you guys gotta come at 9 p.m., not 3 a.m. And I literally turned around and went to sleep. I'm like, I don't care. And I could still see them go on my wall because they were so bright. And I'm like, I'm not turning around. I literally went back to sleep.
Wow.
But the next day, I tell these 2 girls that were also staying in this villa, and we went to dinner, and they were like, they looked at each other and they go, should we tell him? And I'm like, what? And neither of them were from Spain either. And one was, sorry. And they were like, because they were sharing a room, and I was in my own guest house. And they were like, at 3 a.m. that same time, one of these 2 girls woke up in the middle of the night because the other one was going like this to her leg, and unaware of it, totally asleep, and she was slapping her leg. And then she goes, she ran and turned on the light, and she said within seconds the girl was off the bed and on the floor looking up at her, and she goes, she didn't even turn on the light, sorry, her phone. She flashed her phone. She said, I don't even know how, but by the time I take my phone out, she's on the ground looking up at me and saying, thank you for showing me the light. And then she said it didn't feel like it was a positive thing though. Like my experience felt light and loving, and I was like, okay, you guys come back tomorrow please at a reasonable hour, But her thing was like, it felt like scary,
Yeah.
So they slept with the lights on the rest of the night.
Wow.
It was very interesting, but I was wondering if because we were all meditating and doing breath work and staring up at the stars that maybe we invited something,
You probably did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've been told and what I've researched, they're not perfect, right?
Right.
They're not all benevolent beings. They're not all malevolent.
Yeah, or malefic or benefic. Yeah.
Just like humans, they have different sort of agendas, right? And I think it's all dependent upon our own unique genetic blueprint. Like you can do Aya and get a completely different downloads and codes than I can. We're opening up our access with similar medicine. Similar in the sense of your star family. I think it's really where you are, who's connecting with you, what you're available for, what your lesson is. And I just think that the truth is, and what I would implore people to remember is that we have access, period, right? And so we are living in a dimension that is one dimension out of quantum. This is not full reality here. And if you allow yourself to open your psyche, your body, your field up with breath work, with medicine, with just conscious thought, you can commune. And it's not bad, it's not good, it's just information. And I think people can get a lot more information about the truth of who they are when they do those things. It might not always be fun.
Yeah.
Just like a medicine journey isn't always fun. But I think that if you felt a connection to Sirius, you should go down that path and learn more about them. I feel like you're Pleiadian though.
I do too.
Yeah.
I do too. Because I had that experience, but like the Pleiadians are the ones that keep calling.
And you have hazel eyes.
And we both wore blue and white.
Yeah, exactly. We both blue and white. Their colors are blue and purple.
Why the hazel? What does that have to do?
Hazel, I've been told that those with hazel eyes have some sort of relationship with
Interesting.
other parts of the universe.
Oh, I would think blue. But yeah, that makes
I've
sense.
heard hazel, and like kind of the golden hazel that you have. I have
yes.
that too.
Oh, wow.
And the second I looked you up on the internet, of course, but then I walked in, I was like, yeah, he's my people.
Yeah, I felt it too. It's so true. It's different. When I saw you in person, I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
familiar.
You can like look into someone's eyes. You're like,
Yeah.
there's a sense of home. Like
Yeah.
I've seen you before. Like we're from the same place.
Yeah.
Maybe
yeah.
we didn't know each other then specifically, but we know where we're from.
Yeah. The soul knows. Okay, so this is the part where I was like, I have one of the glossary terms. I was like, I don't know.
Let's talk about it.
Okay, you say one of the terms was you talk about Age of Aquarius, and we're in the
Yeah.
Age of Aquarius. So I believe Age of Aquarius is around 400 years away. We're in Age of Pisces. And another, like, I used to do Kundalini regularly, and the people in that class would always be like, we're in the Age of Aquarius. I'm like, bitch, does it look like the Age of Aquarius? That's an enlightened age. We're in the dark age.
Yeah.
We're so close though, because these ages are thousands of years long.
Right.
We're like, we're this close
Yes.
to Age of, so 400 years sounds like, oh my God, so far. But think about, so the beginning of the dark age in Indian, so Vedic astrology, it would be Kali Yuga. And that was about 2,000, 2,500. Think about it. You would steal an apple and they would chop your hand off. There were Vikings,
Yes.
conquests. There were, it was dark ages. So we're still in the dark age, but we're in that ascending point. We're so close, which is
Right.
why we don't do the things we did. People aren't just raping each other on the street and it's like no big deal.
Right.
It's like there are, it's a scary world that we live in kind of still, but not really compared to what it was. And where
Yes.
we're going is like pure light, and every year closer. So why do you say Age of
I'm
Aquarius?
so glad we're talking about this. This is actually really important. So I say in the book, I mention Age of Aquarius, and I say in the paragraph, I just edited the whole thing. It's very close to me. So I say it has been purported that we are in the Age of Aquarius right now. It doesn't necessarily matter if that's true or not. To look around this current moment in humanity, as I was saying earlier, which is a critical part of our evolution. Like, it's so exciting to be a human being on planet Earth right now. I really do believe that because what I said earlier in our conversation, what we do right now is going to impact generation after generation after generation's generation of what they're going to inherit based on what we do now, because we are at the turn of a dial. And 400 years isn't, in the grand history of this planet's existence, which is 4 billion years, right? And things take thousands of years to change and evolve, is what you were saying, in the dark ages to now. It's different. There's some parallels. But this is such a important time to become conscious of our power and how we can shift. We're part of that shift. We're part of that awakening. I don't necessarily, I've worked with a lot of different astrologers myself. I probably have like 3 that are like who I call upon. They all have a different opinion on when the Age of Aquarius is actually starting. Some people think it was a week ago when Pluto moved into Aquarius. I don't necessarily think that's true. But if you look around what's happening from the light perspective of just this insurgence of, ancient modalities like Reiki and breathwork and acupuncture and angel court, veganism and conscious environmentalism, like, there is an awakening. We are realizing that this life cannot only be about our own satisfaction and gratification, that we have a responsibility to our communities, to humanity, to the earth. And so, slice it how you want, it's something's changing, something's afoot right now.
So true. And everyone agrees on that.
And everyone
I think.
agrees on that. So whether it's like 400 years, I actually think it's an important point, versus a millennia, versus 4 millennia, which has been the patriarchy, right? Which is like a drop in the bucket of the history of time on this planet. It's 4 billion years old. Humanity formed hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's a long time before the patriarchy began, which I can talk about.
But even when you say patriarchy, I think is interesting, because I think and I know you gear toward women and stuff as well, but I also think it's not necessarily man-woman, it's feminine-masculine.
1,000%.
I feel like I'm really perfectly balanced. That's not from an egoic place. It's from a self. I'll tell you all the things about me that I think that are unbalanced, right? But balanced, masculine, feminine. Whereas I see certain people, we can talk about women, where when you talk about patriarchy, have been told, because it supports the system, right? Keep going, business, 2 incomes, build, be strong. So women then think, I need to be dominant, I need to be strong. And so not necessarily man, but I need to be
the energy
of a masculine, of a man, right? I need to be strong, right? But then what are they doing? They're diluting their feminine. I've even heard women, like friends of mine, be like, oh God, I'm on my period. It's like, do you know how
sacred that
is? A shaman you can't be in an ayahuasca ceremony when
your moon blood is more powerful,
and it's so strong than the medicine is.
Yes.
That's how powerful you are.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? So it's like, the little things like that.
I'm so glad we brought this up because I obviously talk a lot about the divine feminine, the feminine frequency. I wrote a book, As a Woman, for Women. I'm here for women rising, but doesn't even really technically make me a feminist even, or like hating men. We need both. We need the yin and the yang. We're out of balance.
Yeah.
And when I say the patriarchy, I should be specific and explain it as really the toxic patriarchy. All of the things that have we've overvalued, right? Like structure and growth and time and power and strength and, ownership and rulership. Like that came about really at the dawn of recorded history, church and state, Old Testament, 4,000 years ago. And the feminine prior to that, which was a very long period of time, hundreds of thousands of years, actually ruled the civilizations. It was a matriarchy.
Yeah, I've heard that with like Atlantis and stuff was all ruled by queens.
It was rooted in the feminine. We are sitting on a feminine being, Gaia, right? We are of a feminine world, but we've been programmed and conditioned, and it's ancestral. It's in our DNA to have literally forgotten that. Forget that it's been oppressed. It's been forgotten and written out. And so the divine feminine isn't binary, it's not gender, it's values. And the divine masculine is not gender, it's values. And they're beautiful values to each. We need both. And women are finding their power, and it's really a huge part of my story and my book. I overvalued the masculine as a feminine being.
Well, especially as an entrepreneur,
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I was so hooked on the hamster wheel of growth and success and having things look like this every day, when really our businesses, just like our bodies, just like, our cats, just like the plants, like we operate in cycles and rhythms. That's the matriarchal mode. And we're so filled with disease and disassociation because we've unrooted from that. And that's really the message when I speak about the feminine frequency, what I want us all to come home to, not just women, so that we can heal our planet. And it starts by healing ourselves and getting into right relationship with her. The feminine is, what Hathor told me, like the feminine frequency is here now. Women need to find their power, not just in their masculine, but in their feminine. And you strike me as a very balanced human being. I know we just became friends, but men need to be in their masculine power as much as they need to be in their divine feminine hearts. And women need to relish the power and the strength of the feminine innate nature within them, as well as call upon the divine masculine power. Because if we have that, this world is going to be just a better place to be. And that's what I'm here for. I don't have children. I have nieces and nephews, but I care about the future of this planet. I know I'm needed right now. Every one of us is. I have such a deep responsibility. It's not a choice.
God, I feel that too.
Right?
Even with our podcasts, right? Like we both have them. I was like joking with Tanya earlier, your publicist. I was like, there are a lot. I'm not just doing it for fun. If I want to have fun, I'll go to Europe for 2 months.
Say less.
It's not like, you know what I mean?
Yes. It's a lot to do this
It's
work.
a lot.
Yes.
And there's a lot easier and ways to make money. And there's a lot of, you know what I mean? Like it's just that it's really, I feel like I would be neglecting why I came here. And I was like telling my astrologer the other day, I'm like, I didn't come here for vacation. I'm not here to be a human and have fun. I'm here because there's I was needed. There's things we have to do. Exactly.
Yeah, you're on a mission. That's why I think you're Pleiadian.
Yeah.
It's a very Pleiadian point of view.
God, I got to get into this. I'll go to Shasta this year.
Yeah.
I want to leave people with things they can do.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you about Simply Be. We didn't even get into that either. But you had a super successful marketing agency, and you just sold it. So congrats on that. I mean, you were talking a real entrepreneur. It was a 7-figure business. So I'm guessing multi-7-figure. So I'm guessing you sold it for many millions.
We did
right?
good.
Is that public, or are you not talking about the actual number?
It was a private sale, but we did. I'm going to be good.
So you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview that your first business, though, because that was your second, went into debt.
Yes, it did.
There's a podcast I love called How I Built This. I don't know
if
you know,
that show.
It's so good. I haven't listened in probably a year, but I used to love it. And what I took away from all of these entrepreneurs that started the biggest companies that we know today, Uber, Instagram, whatever, you name it, a lot of them failed on so many businesses before those. 100%. And I think what makes it successful entrepreneur different is one, knowing, okay, I'm gonna kill my baby, like this one's done, and move on. And also to not feel defeated.
Yes.
And it's okay to feel defeated. You'll have those days, but to not overall just give up on like, I'm not a business person.
Totally.
Right?
Yes. I mean, my first business was my real life MBA, like School of Hard Knocks. I went to school for theater. I was an actress for 5 years out of college. I waitressed. And then I started my first business at 27, and I had no freaking idea what I needed to do to run a business. I just learned on the job. And we were critically successful in that business, but financially like a mess. And I didn't know how to lead. I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to manage a P&L. I didn't know how to be a good business partner. I didn't know how to organize my time. I didn't know how to really stand for my own gifts and own that I had weaknesses.
Everything you just said sounds exactly like my first business, the one that I just dissolved like probably less than a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the initiation to become an entrepreneur is to fail, frankly. And I licked my wounds for about 2 years after that failed. I went into a corporate job, made some money, paid off my debt. That business left me in a ton of debt and a ton of insecurity, right? And I got enough courage to start Simply Be in 2017, so when I was about 33. And I had learned all of my mistakes. And I, not to say that I didn't make any in Simply Be, I did. But I was able to apply those learnings so differently. And going back to just the heart of our conversation, I really was not that conscious of a person in my late 20s. Like I wasn't really on the spiritual path. I kind of was. I hadn't fully awakened yet. I really wasn't doing my own work. And I had done that work towards the end and through my corporate job. I started really investing in myself, retreats, coaches, therapists, medicines, like reading the books, watching the podcast, listening to the podcast, watching the TED Talks, like started to fuel my soul with a new understanding of who I was and really take radical responsibility. I think that was the biggest unlock, because for the longest time, I wanted to blame my former business partner in that business for destroying it. I had all of these reasons why it didn't work, but you point one finger at someone else and you have three pointing back at you.
Whoa.
Try it.
Oh, I like that.
It's one of my biggest life philosophies.
Wow.
And so I was able, actually at a women's retreat, realize what a victim I was being to my whole freaking life. And when you claim all of your dark and all of your light, that's really when you find your power, when you become empowered, when you become self-empowered, because nothing can call you out because you've already called yourself out. And so I took that state of being to start this second business. And I say this is one of my favorite things to tell young entrepreneurs, like your business will only grow to the extent of which you grow as a person. You have to do your own work. It's a direct reflection, as above, so below. And so Simply Be was like a rocket ship, and it was really a ride of my lifetime. I mean, I learned so much. I'm so proud of everything we've done, but it was also, we go through those same lessons. I was still kind of hooked on this masculine, like toxic masculine hustle paradigm that left me not broke, really successful financially actually, but totally burnt out and dark and depressed and out of alignment. And so when I kind of got the memo that I needed to change and heal my life, that's really when it became clear I was ready to sell my business, because it wasn't really me anymore. It wasn't sustainable for me to play that character, because in a way I had built up this persona as like Simply Be CEO, Jessica Zweig, bright yellow, on the marketing train, like let's talk about social media. Like I can do that, but it didn't light my soul up, and I was still playing that avatar. And so when this whole thing manifested and I got the call from this company that wanted to buy me, funny enough, they had emailed me a few times throughout the years and I wasn't ready. And I was fully ready. And I was super clear that I have a new story to tell. And I'm building a whole new business now, and I'm doing it from a whole different, not only tactical, mental new lessons, but a whole new vibration.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm hoping to take women along with me on.
So let's finish on that last part. So the 8, you talk about this in the book, the 8 divine feminine embodiments of wealth creation.
Yes.
So let's talk about those. I have them written down here. I can go through, or if you want, you can.
I love that you read it. I can pick that up, that it stood out to you. Because that's like one of my favorite chapters. I'm known as the businesswoman in the world, but this is a whole spiritual book. And there's that one chapter on money and career.
And number 1 is frequency.
And number 1 is frequency.
So why is that important?
Frequency is where it all starts. right? It's knowing, vibrating at your own unique frequency, knowing that no one has what you have, no one's got the stories you've got, no one's got the failures you've got, and that makes you inherently valuable. That's your magic.
Sorry to piggyback off that. So masculine to interrupt. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, please.
In the very beginning of my YouTube, before this podcast, just YouTube itself. Yeah. So I started YouTube in 2014, and then I stopped posting for like 5 years, and I just started again. But in those very few 4 years, I had 40 million views. I was doing really well, but I was trying in the very beginning to be like Anthony Bourdain, trying to sound like Oprah. I'm like, well, how would she sit in an interview? What would she say? What kind of questions would she ask? Because she was in my idea of a good interviewer, and he was my idea of a good writer, like voiceovers and stuff. And they would get like 20,000, 30,000 views, which is okay. But then when I started to just be me and interrupt, I'd get 10 million views and 5 million views and 7, because people, I think, can tell if you're trying to be someone else. It might have been Shaman Durek. Someone was sitting here and told me, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you who you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say it louder, Frank. This is so
If
key.
you don't know who you are,
what you're saying is so
Yeah.
I mean, it's really the foundation of my agency. Like authenticity is true. It's such an overplayed word, but it's so important. It's such a superpower. Frequency, like attracts like, right? That's energy, that's quantum science, that's not woo. And when we are vibrating at our own unique frequency, we magnetize what is like us and what resonates. And we, at the same time, repel what is not for us and what is not like us. If I look back at my entire career and all the clients and all the community that I've amassed over time, they matched my vibration. They were a reflection of me. At the very beginning of Simply Be, I was a little insecure. I was a little, needy. I didn't have a full strategy. It wasn't super clear. And that's who I was attracting. Clients that had that same exact energy, right? And to your point around when you're trying to be someone you're not, the views go down. But when you are fully in your own vibration, your own frequency, the views go up. That's because you're emanating a magnetism that you can't manufacture. It has to start there. And when it comes to trying to manifest wealth and grow your abundance, that's rule number one. That's why I put it first. It's simply being you, which is the heart of what I've always talked about.
And then number 2 is equanimity.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
So these divine feminine manifestations are really inspired by the codes of Gaia, right? We're so out of balance here. And this idea of equal exchange, right? It feels really crappy when we know we're not getting paid enough for what we're doing, right? To really value yourself and to have that equal exchange of money, monetary value, and what you're providing. And I ran an agency, it's a very specific business model, but we would always deal with what's called scope creep because our clients were demanding more of our time and energy, and we were losing money, and it was out of balance. And on the flip side, maybe we've all been there where we're getting paid too much, we're not doing the full job, or we're not really pulling our weight. And that leaves this ache factor, this heaviness, this guilt. So it's not in alignment. There has to be equanimity for it to fully be in abundance, because it cannot just be about you. It's one of the biggest unlocks, and I hope my book helps readers get there. But to make money, to come from this place of survival for your own well-being only gets you so far. When you really come from a place of how can we all thrive? Surviving is less than thriving, but it cannot just be about you. It's not an, right relationship. So equanimity is that equal exchange of always ensuring that it's balanced, that you're not giving too much, that you're not taking too much, that you're not taking too little, that you're not giving too little. And that really heals, frankly, your nervous system. And that's really the whole point of this chapter, because there's so much conversation on manifestation and money and abundance today in the narrative, and I'm here for it, but it's cognitive. It's all about visualization, affirmation, psychology, and it's working. It's not bad.
I love that you say that, because I actually saw in your thing, you called it embodiment of wealth creation, and then there was something about manifestation or something.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask about that. I'm like, isn't that used?
It's so overused.
Very much in a
cognitive way.
Yeah.
And it's it's law of attraction. It's a lot of these teachers. I'm here for it.
Well, that started the path for us, right?
It did.
I remember what was the one you just said? The secret, right?
Yes, the
and
secret.
then it got people thinking. It's scratching the surface, but maybe that's what we needed 20 years ago.
I agree. And the real flex today, I think, of manifestation, that's the content. It's not the context. The context is actually how we learn to receive from a physical standpoint. How do we rewire our bodies to move through this world with safety to receive in the first place? And that has been so overridden by all of this cognitive narrative. So equanimity creates this level set in your body because you're in, again, right relationship. You're not stressed because you're overgiving and that creates a gnarliness in your system. You're not taking too much and not giving enough, and that creates a gnarliness in its own right. Equanimity is a baseline so that we're really creating harmony in how we make money. That isn't talked about very often.
So you have 8 principles. Number 3, and maybe we end it there because I want people to get the book.
Perfect.
And like you can, go into depth on each one. But number 3 is service.
Yeah,
I love that one.
Yeah.
So why service?
Well, women,
and how, I guess.
Yeah, women have a very, I shouldn't say all women, I don't want a blanket statement, but we have sometimes an aversion to being salesy, right? Like to sell. You have to learn how to sell effectively. There's lots of beautifully divine masculine like tactics and structures and operational efficiencies and styles of selling. But it still feels like we're trying to convince somebody, right, to do something for us and prove something that there's value. And that comes from our minds, I think. When we come from our hearts, right, when we really truly tap into this vibration that I am serving you, I am helping you. It is an honor and a privilege to do this for you because I care about you. I genuinely believe in you. That creates the best clients. That creates more true freedom in how you choose your clients and create abundance. I had this moment years ago when I was sort of beginning the online world and doing like my webinars and stuff, and you're trained, do your upsell, do your cross sell at the end. I was talking to a friend, a very well-known and respected entrepreneur, and I was like, I hate that word. He's like, it's not an upsell. It's an upserve. It's an opportunity for you to continue to serve your community. And yes, there's a value exchange to that. But again, back to equanimity, back to frequency. So that's why I put a reframe on service, because we can't fake that. We have to have that genuinely come from our souls. And if you really operate from that place, you'll never sell a thing. You'll never feel salesy in your life. And that truly creates, I think, the most aligned business for you.
Yeah, you're of service.
You're of service.
Yeah, and then of course there's a what's that word?
Reciprocity.
I never know how to say it.
I love that word.
Yeah, and which is one of your principles.
Yeah, it's one of my principles.
Yeah, I love that. I was at a retreat in Palm Beach like a year ago, and I was speaking to a woman, and she does kind of what I do, where we help people in completely different ways. Hers is nutrition. For me, it's like energy work. But we talked about it's not work, it's my expression of service. It's the way I express my service, I like
right.
that.
And I'm so excited to talk to you because I know that you unlocked that in yourself too.
Yeah.
And now you're doing God's work, you're doing God's work, you're doing the light work.
The light work,
You're doing the light work.
Yeah. All right, well, I can talk to you all day.
I could talk to you too.
I can talk to you all day. Let's end it there. Thank you again for coming here, and I'm sure it's like one of many.
Yeah, one of many. We're friends now. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make you believe that you really choose it. Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my debt don't extend me on my dividends. If it did, I'd have to keep pivoting. Turn the other cheek and down another dose of adrenaline. I don't need to pretend to live a life that I never did, cause I'm right where I need to be. You can see from the